Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Kerry Magro, professional speaker, best-selling author, and autistic self-advocate, and I'm so excited to be able to present this presentation to you. Thank you so much again for Scranton University for having me on teaching the way our students learn, inclusive classrooms, and curriculum strategies. I have a very unique story around this topic as somebody who has a firsthand perspective of succeeding in school with a learning disability. I was diagnosed with autism when I was 4 years old, and I went through the school system in inclusive environments for a majority of the time. So now that I've overcome many of my obstacles today, I actually, ironically enough, graduated with my doctorate in education. So I could go about being an adjunct professor to teach about our very special community. So tonight, I'm going to share with you some hopefully helpful resources on how you can go about making your classrooms or for your kids more inclusive. So I'm a big advocate of giving you all my notes from today's presentation. So if you scan this QR code right here, or if you follow the link bit.ly/Kerry slide notes, I would be more than happy to send you all of the PowerPoint slide notes from tonight's presentation. In addition to that, if you would like to leave me any feedback after tonight's presentation, that would be great. You could follow that link or scan that QR code as well with your camera phone. But to get us started, I wanted to share a quick video with all of you so you could get a little glimpse into my journey from the kid who was nonverbal till he was 2.5 to today being a public speaker. I hope you enjoy.
Guest is an accomplished public speaker and activist who has devoted his life to helping others. Not bad for a guy who was completely nonverbal for the first few years of his life. But once Kerry Magro found his voice, he had a lot to say.
My parents have always told me I'm special, so why am I special? And then later on, I realized that I'm even more special because I have autism.
Kerry Magro's childhood was marked with rough patches. He was completely nonverbal at age 2 and diagnosed with autism at age 4.
I just remember having difficulties trying to explain myself to the world around me.
When Kerry did speak, he struggled to express himself.
Most of my memories were simply just about that kid who wanted to communicate with the world around him, but didn't have the verbal means of actually doing that.
His mother, Suzanne, remembers watching her son have a hard time adjusting to the outside world.
He turned 2 and he was scared of everything. He was scared of the water, he was scared of the rain.
But as the years went on, Kerry slowly began to find his words.
When you can't communicate with the people you love the most in this world about even some of your basic needs, it gets really, really tough. So, but luckily, once I started talking, I never stopped talking.
Kerry went on to graduate high school, attend Seton Hall University, and then independent living. Today, Kerry is a professional speaker, activist, and mentor dedicated to educating people about autism. Wow. This is a tough one today. Kerry is currently finishing up his doctorate in education while also writing a children's book about autism acceptance in addition to his public speaking. Good for him.
So this is just a little bit into my journey from a non-speaking child to today being a public speaker. And today I have the wonderful opportunity to travel the globe and to talk about celebrating differences within our community. Again, the opportunity to also talk about inclusion in terms of professional development, also speaking as part of student assemblies on topics such as being kind to others and also bullying prevention. During that time, I've had the opportunity to receive my undergraduate and master's degrees from Seton Hall University in sport management and strategic communications before deciding to go into the education realm, realizing that there were many disabled individuals who really didn't feel like their voices were being heard within our community. So being able to have a platform to be able to discuss from a first-person perspective about autism and other disabilities has just been a dream come true for me. Also, during that time, gained the opportunity to work in several films to bring a realistic portrayal of autism and disability to our entertainment industry. There's still not enough representation within our community, especially in terms of autistic and disabled actors. In addition to that, given the opportunity to work on the TV show Miss Fletcher, which focuses on a nonverbal character who's on the autism spectrum, getting to write several books based on my journey growing up with autism. And in addition to that, having a nonprofit organization where we provide scholarships for students with autism who go to college, while also providing mentoring. Peer mentoring is something we'll talk a little bit about tonight when we're talking about inclusive education and the importance of it. I started a scholarship program simply because I remember when I was in school having a terrible time with standardized testing and realizing many of my mentees were also having the same challenge. So starting a scholarship program to help students with partial scholarships so they could attend a post-secondary program. Again, the opportunity to give out 100 in the past 9 years, while also starting a business grant for small businesses who hire people with disabilities, realizing that many companies were going under during COVID-19, especially small businesses, wanting to do something to help those who are employing those, and realizing the ROI benefits of hiring people with disabilities in the workplace. Not that it's what a company can do for a person with a disability, but it's what a person with a disability could do for that company. So talks I give, in addition to getting the opportunity to collaborate with some amazing people, such as the people at Square University, also getting the opportunity to work on retainer in a technical advisor position for many school districts, in addition to student assemblies, professional development, also getting to talk to our parents as part of CPAC and PTA presentations, also getting to speak to businesses. Some studies indicate that the unemployment rate for those with autism is up to 90%, while those with disabilities are twice as likely to be unemployed or underemployed compared to their non-disabled peers. In addition to that, also giving effective presentation courses in addition to virtual presentation best practices. During my journey, I really never expected myself to write books, but my mentees were always curious about learning more about my journey. So I wrote a book called Defining Autism from the Heart in 2013. Hopefully, I thought it would sell maybe like 50 copies, but within 3 days it became an Amazon bestseller for special need parenting, and they continue to give us a platform to discuss autism within our communities. Gained the opportunity to write a book on relationships for those on the spectrum a year later called Autism and Falling in Love, and then also gained to contribute to a book with some incredible colleagues of mine, Dr. Temple Grandin, an incredible autistic advocate, in addition to Stephen Shore, another incredible autistic advocate, on a book called College for Students with Disabilities Where Do Belong, which focuses on 17 perspectives of students with disabilities who have successfully navigated post-secondary education and what they've learned from those experiences. We also just came out with a new book that I contributed to called Life After Lockdown, which talks about COVID-19 and the importance of getting back out in the world and how we could go about that, especially for our autistic community. Again, the opportunity to contribute again with Dr. Temple Grandin and so many incredible and amazing people to really highlight this important topic. In addition to The Out of Sync Child Grows Up, which talks a lot about sensory challenges, and then Love What Matters, which is a book of, honestly, just how it says in the title, real people, real stories about people within our community, several of them who have disabilities. If I leave you with anything tonight, when we talk about the topic of inclusive education, one of the things I hope you get is that we need to normalize in our classrooms that disability has no look. No matter if it's a general education class, special education classroom, and inclusion classroom, we need to do a better job of helping others understand that if you met one individual with a disability, you've met just that, one individual with a disability. Every single person you're going to meet is going to have their own unique strengths and challenges compared to the next person you're going to meet. So it's important to be mindful of that and to also realize the people who have invisible disabilities. The two most common things that annoy me to no end are when people come up to me and they say, Kerry, you have a disability, but you don't look like you have a disability. And then the second thing is, Kerry, you have a disability, but you look so normal. And I kind of questioned that, and I was like, so what's normal supposed to look like? We need people to understand that there are going to be some people in our community that, even though they might not necessarily present any signs on the surface, doesn't mean that they might not go through challenges today. Another key mantra I hope I can leave you with today is that if you realize that in the educational world, if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. Make sure that you have as much documentation as you possibly can, because ideally this will help in the education world with your child's study team. It will help ideally to also build self-awareness of yourself, but also the students who might potentially be in your classrooms. So one of the big things about inclusive classrooms, which I would love to talk a little bit about, is the importance of self-advocacy. We need to have larger conversations in our inclusive classrooms about the importance of individuals self-advocating for themselves. I always believe when I talk about when to tell somebody about their diagnosis is when they're starting school, because that's initially the time when they're going to start realizing general education classrooms. Potentially, they're going to start realizing some of the things that make them special, but they might not know what special means. So one way that we encourage and nurture self-advocacy in the classrooms while also promoting inclusion is monologue days, where advocates get the opportunity to share a little bit about their stories. And I had the wonderful opportunity to speak at a school in Sleepy Hollow, where this young boy was allowed to introduce me, but also share a little bit about his story of growing up with autism. And this is what he had to say to his classmates about his diagnosis.
I am a person with autism. As many of you don't know, I was born without the ability to speak and express myself. I could not call for my mom, ask for food, wave, or play. Through the undying devotion of my mother and the work of many professionals and teachers, I began to speak in full sentences at 4 years old. Presently, I do very well in school. I played a bass here and in a private jazz quintet. I assist neuroscientists at Harvard and MIT with their research to help people with autism. I have dreams of becoming a professional musician and perhaps a cybersecurity expert who works for the federal government. Nonetheless, I have tremendous social challenges. I constantly worry. I don't know how to make and keep friends, and therefore I'm lonely. I often unintentionally say the wrong things. I talk about my interests about conversation. I have a hard time coping with the unexpected. I get sad when I notice peers or adults judging me without understanding my struggles. I have a hard time determining what is socially acceptable. I misinterpret people's intentions. I am self-aware and embarrassed when my coping skills have failed me. Each and every day, I wake up and put on a brave face to face my many challenges. I try my best. I'm honored to introduce Kerry Magro, one of my heroes and role models.
So I absolutely love his story. And I also love him being so brave to share that story. This is something that I think we could encourage in more of our schools when we're talking about inclusive classroom ideas. Now, this can just open up anyone's mind, especially if they don't have a personal connection, by just having those quick 3 to 5 minute introductions where kids can just talk a little bit more about their diagnoses. So that's one idea that I absolutely love, and I'm definitely encouraging in every single school I go to speak to today throughout K through 12. In addition to that, I also think that especially when we talk about class days, one of the things when we talk about inclusion, one thing that I would love to see us do more of is explaining what those class assignments are going to be at the beginning of the day. So, for example, a teacher may tell the students their actual subjects that they're going to be having in each day, specifically during that day, what the 9 to 3 is going to look like. Or they might say something like, first we'll be reading, then you will have a break, then you will have lunch. Being able to structure that in a way is a way of helping those who might have difficulties with transitions and being more inclusive overall. In addition to that, be concise. I know when I was growing up, structure was really key. But in addition to that, I had difficulties with things such as small talk and sarcasm, and I was very direct in nature. So when you can be direct and concise, especially when you're giving out responsibilities and assignments, the better off we will be overall. And that's just for anyone. Give choices. For example, today during your class, you can pick 3 out of the 5 of these experts to correct for grammar. You might do this in an English class. If it's a math class, it might be 5 problems, and you have to solve 3 as well. So just be thinking about ways that you can give choices, because there is an endowment effect, which we'll talk a little bit later in the presentation, where if students take ownership of their learning, they're more likely to follow through in that learning. Consider a visual timer in your classroom. This is just a great inclusive idea, especially for anyone who has difficulties with transitions. You can check them out at timetimer.com. They're very inexpensive options, maybe $30, $35, just to give a visual timer, and being able to then give reminders before actual transitions as part of that. Not only giving a visual, because many of us are visual learners, but also being able to give us reminders when that transition is about to happen. Educating on stimming and flapping. We need to do a better job of making people realize that if somebody is moving their hands back and forth, it might not necessarily mean that they are struggling. It might be a way of self-regulation, especially when we're talking about inclusion classrooms, where there might be classes with only a few people with disabilities in those classrooms who might be stimming, who might be flapping, and just being able to normalize that can help it a lot of the way. Also, randomizing who's part of small group activities so no one is left out. Some examples would be just having different popsicles, where they might have different colors of the popsicles, and the people who go into a bag and pick a certain color are all teamed together. You might also do just randomization by just doing, all right, count off 1 to 4, and then having all the 1s, all the 2s, all the 3s. This is just a way where nobody is left out. There's nobody who, like, for example, the kickball court, nobody's being picked last. It's just a way of just randomizing that, and also getting kids to engage with other kids as well. Also, one thing that I would love for more of our classrooms to do is just to educate a little bit about disability by doing Ability Week, which is a creative way, which a lot of schools are doing today, where they highlight a different disability every single day for a week. One of the engaging activities they do, it's called Celebrity Disability Bingo, which is actually, ironically enough, something my social skills teacher did when I was 11 years old, where I actually learned about my diagnosis for the first time. We were learning that individuals such as Michael Jordan has ADD, Magic Johnson has ADHD, Leonardo DiCaprio has dyslexia. And then at the end of the class, the teacher said to all of us, all these individuals are special, just like you. And that actually made me want to talk to my parents for the first time about why I was special. And that's the first time they told me I had autism. And it was so life-changing to learn about that diagnosis, but it was also so life-changing to understand that there were other individuals who were special just like me out there in the world, especially for a kid who was the only kid in his class who had autism. It was just so powerful to understand more about our disability community. I would learn later that Dan Aykroyd also is on the autism spectrum, and he contributes 2 of his key interests because of his autism to being able to come out with the Ghostbusters script in the 1980s, co-writing it with Bill Murray. His 2 key passions were being a crime detective and also being a ghost hunter. So this is just a cool activity. You could just Google celebrities who have disabilities and consider playing this activity in your classroom. Learning about my diagnosis at 11 was truly pivotal towards my classrooms feeling more inclusive for me as an individual who's on the autism spectrum. It helped me self-advocate and learn more about my diagnosis. It also made me realize that there were different disabilities out there, that even though I was in special education and I always knew that the students in my classes were special, being able to understand that there were different types of disabilities out there really helped me open my eyes, because I had difficulties with things like tunnel vision and only being able to understand my own perspective and not being able to understand the perspective of others. So being able to have the opportunity to learn about different disabilities really helped open my mind to some of the hardships and some of the strengths that some people have within our community. It also helped me advocate for myself in IEP meetings. I would start sitting in on my IEP meetings to learn more about my strengths and challenges, and also establishing a rapport with my child's study team. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I feel like students, when they're just starting school, should learn about their diagnosis. And sometimes I get pushback from parents who say, well, Kerry, I don't want my child to feel like they are using their disability as a crutch, or I don't want my child to think that there's anything wrong with them. And what I say when that happens is give them positive role models to look up to who have been success stories in their community. That will be a great way of helping them feel empowered by their diagnosis. And I always start off on a novice level, especially if you're a parent who might be watching this, who has a child diagnosed. You might want to say something like, you have something called whatever your diagnosis may be, but it doesn't make you any less of a person. And then just be always up for open communication after that, and to answer any questions that your son or daughter may have. So these are some of my favorite education resources to follow. These are all helpful regardless if you're just in pre-K all the way to university. So Audubon for Kids, a great platform with a lot of educational resources to help during your time in school. Paid Teachers is great for visual schedules and social stories. Many of the times these are free. If not, they just cost $1 or $2. It's just a great way to learn from other teachers and also to be able to share resources. A great newsletter that I would highly recommend signing up for, I get about once every 2 weeks, is Education Week at edweek.org. They are great for educational resources, education in the news, discussions of the Department of Education as well, and what's going on in the world circling around education. It's also where I realized that only 1 in 3 educators receive any form of professional development on special education. And after learning about this, have been constantly encouraging more of our school districts to engage with faculty on professional development funding towards opportunities focused on inclusion and our very special community. We definitely need to do a better job of making sure these numbers don't fall through the cracks, because general education teachers should have an understanding of this disability community, especially with the prevalence of bullying and also learning differences, being that autism and many disabilities continue to be on the rise in the United States. And sometimes people ask me, Kerry, why is this prevalence continuing to rise? And I truly think a lot of it has to come down to us having more awareness. We have digital media, we have social media, and more people are educated because of that, learning more about the signs of different disabilities and making sure that less individuals are falling through the cracks in our schools. So one way we could definitely support the autism community and make the world a more inclusive place for all of our loved ones to live is promoting visuals as much as possible. Many of us are visual learners. Establishing a rapport and, again, teaching the way our students learn is important, but I've noticed a common trend with visuals as a way of helping. And video modeling is a great way of helping break down different tasks. Sometimes we promote different tasks a student might have to do, but breaking it down into different levels of what that task may maintain can be really helpful to build on that structure and to help it actually get across and through to that student. Also pursue social stories and visual schedules and make them personalized if possible. Again, this is going back to the endowment effect, the ownership principle, being able to give these students the ability to own their education and utilize via photos of students. It's also very easy to do via PowerPoint presentations as well if you want to create your own social stories and not go to websites such as teacherspayteachers.com. Also, universal design for learning is something we should continue to encourage in more of our inclusive classrooms. It inspires the creating of learning opportunities and environments that are relevant, responsive, and flexible in nature for all students. It doesn't only make good sense for those with disabilities, but it makes good sense for everyone. Consider feedback in this universal design on a daily, weekly basis to let students know how they are doing. You structure your lesson goals and then see how they are doing academically and if they are following through with those goals and what they might still be having trouble with. Embracing digital readers and text-to-speech program for auditory learners. Again, it's not only visual learners, there is auditory, there is kinetic. Universal design for learning really focuses on a lot of engagement because lecture style is dying in our classrooms. So that's another big thing. Also, if you're trying to learn more about how you can go about universal design for learning, I highly recommend looking at the assessment area, classroom assessments techniques, also known as CATs. You could simply just go into Google search and type it, and there will be so many incredible resources on this. But basically, in a nutshell, what it does is builds on strength-based learning by asking typically non-graded tests and quizzes to students to get to know them better in their learning styles, such as questionnaires that are focused on what they've learned that day and what was most useful to them. You're just trying to get a gauge of what they found most enlightening, most helpful to them in their academic process, and then being able to go back and try to develop lesson plans based on what they have found most helpful. This will definitely help, especially when we talk about autism. A lot of our kids have key interests. If, for example, they are having lesson plans where they are talking a lot about their key interests, this might be a way of associating different lesson plans to focus on similar key interests that they may have. It also helps with when it comes to supplemental learning plans, because again, many of our students think differently and what might potentially be helpful to them to succeed. In terms of parent involvement ideas, I truly believe in parent-teacher collaboration. Now, I will say this with a caveat because I know so many parents, especially in low-income households, who definitely have a challenge when it comes to actually putting themselves into these roles and being able to engage. So it has to come from a place of true collaboration. It has to be a teacher-parent collaboration overall. It can't be the parent is not doing enough. It has to be that the teacher and parent are going to contribute the same amount to help this student succeed. So for example, one of the things that I see many parent-teacher groups do is just starting a private Facebook group where families and educators can connect. This is just an easy way of also building on any classroom updates that you may have, any upcoming events, especially if your school's website has some difficulty with its forms and being able to collaborate via that way. Also, I would definitely recommend student alumni organizations where parents and teachers can receive advice from former students, but also parents who have been through the process as well and what advice they could give to the upcoming teachers and upcoming students who might be in their classrooms. It's a free volunteer way of getting more and more opinions and perspectives within our community. More open house opportunities just benefits everyone. Also, when it comes to building on the whole family dynamic, I always encourage open house opportunities when we're talking about inclusive education, where siblings could come in, especially if they're not at the same school, if grandparents could come in and really get a sense of the education. Basically, like we talk a lot about in individualized education plan meetings, You want your village there. You want the people who understand the student the best to be there. That's one way with open house opportunities, getting to understand the school, getting to understand some of the teachers, really helps establish a rapport. Discussing additional volunteer opportunities as well. I know many school districts have really been embracing special education parent advisory councils over the years. They are just a great way of providing those volunteer opportunities, but also to really get a sense of their school district via collaboration with faculty. In addition to that, chaperones and then also volunteers for field trips who are parents can be helpful. So parents and teachers, but also parents and students can collaborate as well. So I truly believe when we talk about inclusive classrooms, another key area that I would like to address is the importance of sensory-friendly events. Now, these are helpful because when we talk about inclusion classrooms, when we're talking about general ed and special education students being in the same classroom with specific accommodations, obviously for the special education students, one of the ways that we can help educate is by hosting more sensory-friendly events, because they also help the students who have special needs be able to engage a little bit more in the world around them without feeling any specific challenges, especially when it comes to autism. One of the common challenges I see after social and communication challenges is sensory processing. My sensory processing was always hypersensitive. So I would never, for example, be able to do a Santa event at my school when some schools do the Santa events where they get to ask students what they would like for Christmas. I was really never able to do that. So via my nonprofit, one of the ways that we help is something I hope we can do in many more schools for years to come. And I wanted to share a quick video with all of you so you can understand a little bit more about what I mean by that.
No, please take my seat. Sarah Callaghy had a one-of-a-kind meeting with Santa. The 8-year-old has autism and is nonverbal. Her father brought her to this event because this Santa's helper understands the challenges of autism firsthand.
Santa also has autism. It's a special connection, special bond.
The helper is actually 28-year-old Kerry Magro. Diagnosed at 4, his sensory challenges prevented him from visiting Santa as a child. He created this event so others like him don't miss out.
This event is more inclusive because we dim the lights, we turn down the sound and try to help them as much as we can.
Just as a reach out, it just takes his time. There's no rush.
Most of the elves and Mrs. Claus are occupational therapists and special education teachers. The team visited with 181 special needs families, including 4-year-old Rusty Marsh. Is this the first time you've seen Santa?
Yes. Is it?
Yes. And was he a nice Santa?
Yes.
With 1 in 68 children diagnosed with autism, Magro hopes to inspire more sensory-friendly events all year round.
Autism doesn't stop in December. It doesn't stop during Christmas.
I want everybody to be happy.
Santa says,
"This is the best Christmas gift of all."
This is the 3rd year of the event, and Magro's mom is one of those jolly elves.
So providing more sensory-friendly opportunities just makes a whole ton of sense to get our special need kids who have those challenges more involved. And there's some great ways you can do that. First off, you can consider sensory-friendly holiday-themed related events, such as sensory trick-or-treat, sensory Santa, sensory Easter events as well. You could also consider what you are doing about in terms of inclusive playgrounds, unified physical education, unified sports. These aren't sensory friendly, but they are inclusive ways to get more engagement with everyone in your school. In addition, if you're looking at more sensory friendly options as we move to open more and more with COVID-19 limitations kind of succeeding a little bit, AMC Theaters has a sensory-friendly movie outing. Typically, these are done in the mornings on Tuesdays or Thursdays, where they turn the lights up so everybody could see each other. They turn down external noise. And one of the greatest things I think I get from many of these events, because they also do sensory friendly Broadway shows as well, is that there's no judgment and everyone could just feel comfortable being who they are. They could stem, they could flap, and there's truly no judgment. And I feel like when students see some of this, it's truly eye-opening to them, and hopefully it will lead to more conversations and people going from disability awareness to disability acceptance within our communities. In addition to that, if you're learning and want to try to do something in your classroom, I would highly recommend going to paautism.org. They have a one sheet. They're also a fabulous resource, being in Pennsylvania, where Scranton University is based, where you can learn more about how you can make an event sensory friendly in your area. Also, a great initiative that's happening, and this has been happening in many of our schools now, is Pec Sports for schools who have nonverbal students. This is just a great way in recess, in the lunchroom, to have nonverbal students, especially because in the autism community, about 1/3 of all autistic children are completely nonverbal. It's the ability to have something like a Pec Sport to help these kids communicate with others who may be verbal. The Elizabethtown Education Foundation in past years has given out grants to be able to do this in the school systems. So if this is something that may interest you to do for your school system, I'd highly recommend following the link and checking them out. Another big reason why we need to talk about inclusive classrooms is the whole impact of bullying, especially for those with disabilities. Those with disabilities are twice as likely to be bullied compared to their non-disabled peers, with those with autism being the highest prevalence of that, simply because of autism and the social and communication challenge. Many of the time, individuals don't have the ability to speak up when they are a victim of bullying, and that's why a lot of bullying situations occur. Also, for example, for myself, as somebody who was a victim of bullying in the school systems, even though I was receiving negative attention, it was some form of attention. So I would befriend bullies. And that was very tough for me growing up. And I also didn't have the social abilities to defend myself once I realized that I was being bullied. So I think we need to do a better job when we talk about inclusive classrooms about discussing and breaking down friendships, breaking down what a bully is. When somebody is being sarcastic, being able to educate, especially in our social skills classes, and being able to provide also more social skill opportunities overall in our schools, being able to understand different levels of tone, and when somebody might be being joking or sarcastic versus when somebody might be serious. This is a great segue to discussing role playing. I think more of our schools should do role playing to help students be able to not only prepare for the future in things such as mock interviews, getting ready for college, talking about relationships, but also to help stop bullying, but also helping individuals who are not bullied not be a bystander, and actually if they see a bullying situation occurring, knowing what to do if that situation happens. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the next few slides. October is a great time where we can discuss this topic within our schools. It's National Bullying Prevention Month, and there's some great groups who do some incredible work in the bullying prevention world that you might want to check out. PACER's National Bullying Prevention Center is my first recommendation. The second one would be Stomp Out Bullying. They also do some tremendous work. And then finally, StopBullying.gov, a government-related organization which is advocating towards stopping bullying within our community. So ways to combat bullying. One of my favorites on this list is Cool to Be Kind anti-bullying clubs. They are a relatively new initiative where, at least to me, they're new. They're an initiative. I think they may have been called something else previously. Anyways, they are an incredible organization that provide anti-bullying clubs in our schools. In addition to that, you can consider lunch buddies. You could consider recess peacemakers is what they call it. Basically, the emphasis is that you have students in school who are peacemakers. If they see a situation happening, they are told by faculty about ways that they could go about actually stopping this from happening, whether it's going to an authority figure and how to address that. Also, again, hosting virtual or in-person assemblies with guest speakers. National Bullying Prevention Month is our second busiest month on our calendar, simply because this is such a huge topic, April being Autism Acceptance Month being our busiest. When we talk about inclusive education as well, one of the things that I would like to address is the importance of being able to have a student be able to use identity first or person first language and being respectful of the way they like to identify themselves. Now, many of us in school were probably told that we should always put the person before the disability. But many deaf and autistic individuals today actually prefer identity first language. So when we talk about our neurodiversity movement and things that we would like to see happening, this is one of the ones, because a lot of us just see autism as part of our DNA and our structure. So this is why we also discuss things such as moving to disability acceptance instead of disability awareness. We've had awareness for so many disabilities over the years, and now it's time in our community to embrace acceptance, to take down things such as bullying and stigmas we have within our community. And try to avoid functioning labels as well. I can't tell you how many advocates I run into who hear themselves being called low functioning or being called high functioning. And even to this day, one of the typical things I get is, Kerry, you have autism, but you're so high functioning. And I just think to myself, so how does that work? It's like a washing machine. It's like you have a high function and you have a low function. That's not how this works for me. Because even though I can speak and my speaking would maybe be considered high functioning, my sensory challenges would still be considered low functioning. So it's not as easy as saying that. One of the things you can say, for example, though, is Kerry's strengths are communication and his weaknesses are sensory challenges. I know that some people, in terms of getting supportive services, need to discuss functioning labels, but I always see it as more support labels versus functioning labels overall. Another big tip is understand lecture style is dying. You need to engage and keep your students excited. I know that so many students, especially in virtual learning, have dealt with challenges with Zoom fatigue. So definitely look into engaging with technology, looking at websites where you can teach by having students doing activities via online projects. In addition, the endowment effect that we talked a little bit about. Students will be more likely to learn if they take ownership of their classes. And there's some great ways that you could do that. You can do teacher for the day. You can do different reward systems, token systems. Teacher Paid Teachers has some great one sheets on that if you want to learn more about that and how you could establish a reward system to build on self-motivation within your schools. Just be mindful that when we're talking about building on that self-motivation, that over time, the students should want to build on just getting good grades simply to succeed later down in life versus getting a reward every time. That's something that we should acknowledge as well. Always work on becoming a better speaker as well. I definitely encourage some educators I know to consider getting involved with Toastmasters, learning and getting involved with a local education group to share best practices on speaking. It's always important to keep these kids engaged, and that's one way of going about it. And then also engage your visuals as much as possible, screencast videos, anything that you could truly do to add an additional element to any specific lecture, specifically that you may be having. So advice based on my own schooling, I definitely recommend still putting an emphasis on parent collaboration. My parents were heavily involved. My mom, ironically enough, joined the Board of Education in my local area. Mental health check-ins are important, especially when we go and transition to life after lockdown, and we're seeing so many individuals who are potentially going to have transitional issues and routine challenges at this time. So definitely make sure that the priority while our kids are going back to school right now are not necessarily focused on grades, but they're focused on getting back to our new normal, as we call it. And then think with the end in mind. Self-awareness is so important, and that's why I continue to think that learning about my diagnosis and being able to self-advocate for myself was one of the best things that happened during my schooling. I wish it was something that would have happened earlier on, especially being somebody who went to 4 different public schools within the first 5 years of its education, and then being in special education classrooms for some of that time, inclusion classrooms for the other time. I feel like it would have helped so much to, when I did start speaking in complete sentences when I was 7, being able to connect with my peers and being able to help them understand why I acted the way I did in some instances, where I was quirky, whether I was stimming, whether I was having some difficulties speaking to other people. So events to consider hosting at your school to engage general education students, faculty, again, the inclusive ideas. National Disability Awareness Month is in October. We kind of connect that with National Disability Employment Awareness Month for adults. Monologue days are just great. I mean, you don't necessarily have to do a student assembly to have these done. It could be as simple as the morning announcements on the intercom, just having a guest student be able to speak a little bit about who they are and just do a spotlight for the day on the student, regardless if they have a disability or not, so they could just introduce themselves to the entire school community. Abilities Week is simply an initiative. Again, we talk a lot about the highlighting different disabilities. We talk a lot about trying to highlight the ones that might be most specific to your school system, and either doing it as small as just educating students in a social skills class, an elective class, or simply homeroom at the beginning of the day about a different disability each day. Respect Week is an initiative that typically is done via October during National Bullying Prevention Month, where we just talk about being kind to others, regardless if they have a disability or not, and celebrating differences. World Autism Month is a great initiative for April, which has been happening for over 50 years now, where we celebrate autistic people and the people that love them. And then Special Education Teacher Month, another way of just highlighting amazing teachers. Always consider how you can give positive feedback to educators in your school and also reward them for all the incredible work that they're doing. I continue to say that educators are the backbone of our society. And that's ironically enough why I decided to change career paths and go into education. In terms of additional resources, again, for everyone, I will be sending the PowerPoint slide notes, so don't worry if you miss a resource or two. You'll have a chance to get them sent to your email after this presentation. But some that I absolutely love are the National Center for Learning Disabilities, Learning Disabilities Association of America, Ed.D Online. This is ran by PBS and highlights stories of those with disabilities. Also for the younger classrooms we might have watching, PBS Kids has, some amazing resources, especially when highlighting autism for younger children. Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood just introduced an autistic individual who's the nephew of one of the teachers. In addition, Hero Elementary has an autistic superhero. So this is all great from the perspective of representation. It also helps when having that initial conversation for parents who might be watching this about a child's formal diagnosis. I always encourage adding a visual element before going about that initial diagnosis in the hopes that they'll just have an aha moment where they might say to you that I shared a lot of similarities to the person we just watched, and might be able to have a better understanding through being able to see somebody their own age, regardless if it's a character on television or film, who's part of that. Also, in addition to that, thinkcollege.net, especially when we're talking about those transition years when they start off at 14, in some states 16, where we're providing transitional services for these individuals as they get ready to graduate from high school. So apps to consider in your classrooms, especially focus on inclusion, especially right now during the COVID-19 pandemic. These can be very helpful for those with anxiety and depression or any forms of challenging behaviors. Calm and Headspace are meditation apps. I definitely think our schools could consider having an elective in yoga and meditation as a way of helping our students. These are just available on the Android store and also via Apple iOS. So definitely check those out. And then also tracking apps that help with different tasks that you may have, such as Clear and Wonderlust. Most of these apps have free services, and then after a certain period have paid subscriptions. This is another really, really important area when we're talking about inclusive education. And something that you could think about in adding to your curriculum in terms of the overall history of mentoring, because some of the greatest and most successful people in our world have had incredible mentors, both in school and in the workplace. Ironically enough, I was in Las Vegas a few years back, and I was giving a professional development talk for over 300 educators. And I asked them, how many of you have a peer mentoring program in your school? And only about 3 of the 350 raised their hands. And I found this so disheartening, because peer mentoring has been shown not only to decrease bullying prevention, but also anxiety and depression, but also being able to build on self-awareness of what some of these students may want to do someday. And I think peer mentoring should start as soon as these students are starting in school, not necessarily anything concrete, just a 6-year-old reading a book to a 5-year-old and being able to build on some of those social connections as well. I definitely recommend for anyone who's interested in starting a peer mentoring program at your school, I would definitely love to help you walk you through that after this presentation as well, is through the National Mentoring Resource Center, and that could simply be found at nationalmentoringresourcecenter.org. So finally, I never expected this to be my life. I was told so many times as a child what I would not be able to do. And being the kid who would go from special education classroom to inclusive classroom to general education classroom for mathematics, because I was so great at math, is that autism can't define who I am. I define autism. And I can only hope, regardless of any current journey that you're currently going right now, if you're an educator watching this, if you're a parent watching this, that you can help your students and your loved ones define their lives and their journeys in the way that they best see it every single day. And I think about what one parent once told me when we're just finishing off everything we're talking about inclusion, is that she would prefer that her child not be homecoming king for just one day, and instead be included every single day of the school year. I think when we talk about inclusive education, that's definitely a goal I hope that all of us can get to one day for our students. So with that in mind, I thank you all so very much for having me and listening to my presentation. These are the ways that you can stay in contact with me, because it does take a village after this presentation. Also, definitely check out the link. If you take out your camera phone and take a photo of the screen and scan the QR code, that will be the way that you can just write down your email address to me, so I can send you the PowerPoint slide notes after this presentation. Again, I consider testimonials the greatest compliment. If you would like to leave me any feedback from this presentation as well. In addition to that, I also want to just share that I'm also doing an employment panel with some incredible panelists where we're going to talk a little bit about neurodiversity in the workforce. I would definitely highly recommend checking that out as part of the conference. I will be moderating that, and we have some really great panelists lined up. So get excited for that. And thank you all so much for tuning in.